The following transmission is between myself and ReticentDuet, one of the two lead writers for the Fallout-themed storytime podcast, Once Upon a Wasteland, a multi-award-winning work of audio drama. Once Upon a Wasteland follows the story of a spy named Beth and the Brotherhood of Steel scribe Odessa Valdez from Fallout 76, as they work together to uncover a secret plot to take over all of Appalachia. During their mission, Beth and Odessa slowly grow closer and begin to explore the growing relationship that exists between them. Over the course of this interview, we talk about the use and meaning of creative storytelling, podcasting in the Fallout fandom, and of course, Once Upon a Wasteland. This is the Atomcast, and the best way to show your support is by subscribing to our Patreon, as your monthly contribution will go towards improving the quality of transmission, as well as helping to decrease the time between uploads. As always, links to our Patreon, as well as guest socials, will be linked in the description below. Without further ado, lead writer for Once Upon a Wasteland Storytime Podcast, ReticentDuet. So it's kind of interesting because I don't know if this is just a me thing, but when I think of the Fallout community, I think of streamers, YouTubers, artists, the odd comic book creator, which I guess also fall under artists. But weirdly enough, despite how radio and audio centric the Fallout setting kind of is, I never really think of like podcasts as like a large part of the community. Obviously, there's podcasts like yours, Chad. Wow, I'm spacing so hard on the Enclave based one.
That's Modus Files.
Modus Files, that was it. There's all these other audio based Fallout themed podcasts. When you came around, how many other big, maybe not big, but how many other noteworthy Fallout podcasts were there when you guys came out?
So I think the ones that I was aware of at the time were Chad, which was the original. Ken is the first person who did a Fallout, at least a Fallout 76 based audio fiction piece, and probably the first overall Fallout one also. And also Modus Files and True Vault Escapades. Those were the really the big three. And Modus Files is sort of a spiritual descendant of Chad. They don't share a universe or really a kind of a theme or a tone or anything, but Ken is the one who sort of got the ball rolling with Lawrence starting Modus Files, and then conversely Lawrence is the one who got the ball rolling for our show.
And so, is it a situation like if it wasn't for Chad, maybe you guys wouldn't exist, or is it more like you guys were more inspired by what Chad did, and then were able to get assistance from them in maybe not starting up your own thing, but getting your project skybound?
Yeah, it's definitely true that if Chad didn't exist, our show wouldn't exist. And I think it's safe to say that if it didn't exist, Modus Files wouldn't exist either, because Lawrence has said his original plan was to write all of his material in novel form and figure out a way to publish it. But Ken said, hey, why don't you do an audio drama? Because he had started Chad at that point, and it had gone really well. So since Chad begat Modus Files and Modus Files sort of begat our show, we certainly wouldn't exist if Chad didn't exist. I don't know the origin story of TVE or any of the other ones, but I can certainly say in our case, we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for Ken and him doing Chad.
It's really interesting because I think because you think like old media, right? Like television, movies, stuff like that. The big thing, even when you stretch into like other like non-media related professions, like business or politics or activism or anything like that, the sort of like big thing, like the thing that maybe not makes you big, but like starts to, make you a lot of money or get you on a lot more people's watch list is when you actually write a book, right? But when it comes to the online creation space, it's interesting because it's kind of the opposite. Like, yeah, there's been YouTubers and other online content creators who have, written books. I think one of the most noteworthy is PewDiePie, and he's written like one or two books, I think, 2 or 3, I can't remember. But the point is, it's very rare to see a content creator actually create a story, an autobiography, what have you, and then get it out there in book format, because it usually takes the form of either just a video, just talking about their lives, or as what happened in what it sounds like you're saying happened in Modus' situation. It wasn't a, you didn't make it into a book. He made it into an audio drama. Is that sort of the same situation that happened with Once Upon a Wasteland? Was this originally supposed to be, a novelization story, but then it was something that you made into an audio play instead, or was it always intended to be audio based?
Well, it wasn't originally intended to be anything, to be honest with you. I'll tell you the origin story, and you'll understand why I said the Modus Files is what led directly into us doing a show. Lawrence put out a casting call, and it had to be 2.5 years ago now, where he had started his show, but it was really mostly, if not all, narration, where it was just him basically reading the story. But he decided that he was going to expand it out and go full cast with it. So he put out a casting call, and one of the roles was for the role of Modus. Now, I had done voice acting for a long time, but I had been out of it for also a very long time. So I decided, hey, this is a low leverage kind of a thing. It's not a paid engagement, but it sounds like it would be a lot of fun, and I always liked acting, so it would be fun to get back into it in a lower pressure way. So I auditioned for the role of Modus, got that role, and Lawrence and I started talking about storytelling and stories, and we talked about my OC, what's my OC's backstory, and he encouraged me to flesh that out. And eventually that grew into writing a couple of scenes involving that character. And it eventually got to the point where I said, hey, you should really consider, doing a whole full-on audio drama, doing a series. So, I toyed around with it, worked on it, and that's sort of where it came from.
You said before that it originally wasn't supposed to be anything. Mm-hmm. Was it, as you just said, was it it started as something that was basically just, you're just filling out your OC's backstory and stuff like that. How did specifically you say it spun off into like what it is now? What was that in between stuff? Because you can write like an incredibly detailed backstory for an insert or a stand-in character. But there's a couple of degrees beyond that where it goes from just like, your own little personal headcanon stuff to an actual radio play sort of thing. So what was the process? What was the process there?
Yeah, well, okay. So to get into my background a little bit, I was a screenwriter, TV mostly, back in the 90s. And I got out of it when it became kind of clear to me that wasn't going to be a sustainable career for me. Mm-hmm. So I do have a background as a storyteller with sort of scripted fiction like that. So, and I didn't stop doing it because I didn't like doing it. It just wasn't going to be something I was going to be able to do, as a career moving forward. So I just got out of it. So it was sort of a natural progression for me to think in that way. So I didn't really necessarily just think, oh, hey, this is what my character's background was, and this is where her personality came from, and those kinds of things. It was really more in the sense of, this is who this character is, what kind of story can I tell with this character at the center. So I think that's probably an important part of this equation too, where I have a background as a storyteller. It just wasn't something that I had done in in quite a long time. And Lawrence's encouragement kind of pushed me along to go through those steps and start up, hey, here's the character. And then, hey, here's a general outline of who this person is, what they want, and what they would potentially do within the confines of this Fallout 76 world. And then you figure out a way to make it compelling, both from a character side and from the story that you want to tell. And it, just kind of fleshes out from there and expands out.
Was Fallout 76 your first Fallout experience?
No, I don't have a huge amount of Fallout experience, but the first game that I played was Fallout 4. And I played that on PlayStation right from launch and loved it. I think I had 5 or 6 different playthroughs and really had a great time with it.
Okay. What was like the big thing that drew you into like the aesthetic and everything? Because obviously, people come into the Fallout series at different points. Some start with the early games, Fallout 1, Fallout 2. Some people start with tactics, which I think is really interesting. But then there's people like me who start with Fallout 3. Some people start with Fallout New Vegas. I've either seen people start with Fallout, like the original Fallouts, and then pick up New Vegas later. But then I've seen people either start with Fallout 3 like I did, Fallout 4 like my sister and you did. And then there's people who come in new to it in Fallout 76. But across those 3 like different or I guess 4 different, 3 different eras. No, it'd be 4. Original Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and Fallout 76. They all kind of have very different tones to it. So like when you went into Fallout 4, like what was the vibe or the tone or the feeling that like kept you invested in it?
Well, I think one of the things that I appreciated about Fallout 4 was, despite the fact that it takes place in a post-apocalyptic environment, obviously there are dark elements to it, and there are elements that aren't a lot of fun to deal with and think about it. The tone was still on the light side, mm-hmm. especially if you compare it to like New Vegas. So I sort of, it certainly wasn't lighthearted, but there was humor there, and there were rich characters that were sort of good people and earnest people, and the stories that were told weren't all just full of nothing but bleak despair. I've never liked those kinds of stories, either telling them or consuming them. So that part of Fallout 4 appealed to me. And you see a lot of people, like one good example I think is, it's been a while since I played Fallout 4. I'm waiting for the next gen upgrade to jump back in. But like the guy who wants to teach, is it Strong? About Shakespeare, the milk of human kindness, that kind of thing. Like here's a guy who believes in that thing so much, despite everything that's going on around him, that society has collapsed and there's monsters everywhere, and humans who are monsters everywhere and trying to, kill and pillage and just be as bad as a human can be. But you still have somebody who believes in something like that. And then you have Piper is another example, who believes in the truth and the sort of the dogged pursuit of truth in spite of all this. So I think there's a very strong and upbeat message about the nature of who humans are, no matter how bad things get. And I think that part of it appealed to me. And I think that's carried forward into Fallout 76. Obviously, it's a different vibe because it's a live service game and you deal with other people. But I think even that kind of manifests in the player base, because I know one of the things that people always say about the Fallout 76 player base is they are extremely, in general, of course, I mean, there are exceptions, but extremely welcoming to new people. People will wait for new players to come out of the vault and drop them care packages with a bunch of stuff in them, and they'll help them level up and give out weapons and modify their armor and all those kinds of things. So I think that's sort of a real world example of the sort of the hopeful nature of at least Fallout 4 and also Fallout 76. So that's probably the thing that appealed to me most. I like upbeat stories. I like happy endings. I like I like stories that sort of make you feel good, while not ignoring that life isn't all sunshine and roses all the time. Bad things happen sometimes to good people, and there's no way around that. But that doesn't mean that everything has to be horrible and bleak all the time.
That is an interesting perspective. That the character you were talking about, who was trying to educate Strong and the super mutants about Shakespeare, Rex Goodman. That's a really interesting outlook on that. I've never really given that character much thought. I do think it's kind of funny that Rex Goodman and like two other people, they run a radio broadcast, but there's no radio station for them. I think that's kind of funny, but yeah, that is a very interesting part of Fallout 4 that because I think that Fallout 4 specifically kind of has, I don't know, there's a lot thematically like going on with its writing. Obviously, paranoia and racism are big themes with the synths and such. Ghouls, obviously. Ghouls are just kind of the ever present analogy there. But yeah, I think that the determination and the persistence of humanity in that sort of writing style is something that gets overlooked a lot. It also bleeds out into things like I forget the name of the quest, but that ship that's parked on top of the bank. I just remember the captain's name is Ironsides, which is funny.
Yeah.
He's like determined, like we are going to make it to the ocean, come hell or high water. And then you have the settlements taking these just previously abandoned locations and then making communities out of them. That's the persistence of the human experience. Fallout 4 has a lot of good writing, but it's not always like direct. Like it's not telling you this. You have to in some cases you kind of have to have a little bit of media literacy to be able to see and to understand the message that it's telling you.
Well, that's a big thing for me as a writer also. And John Carpenter put this really well in. He was talking about this on the commentary for the movie Prince of Darkness, which is one of my favorite John Carpenter films. He talks about trusting the audience. Now, you don't have to be. Well, not only do you not have to be so explicit about everything and just spell everything out, you shouldn't do that, because you should trust the audience, because the audience is smart and you need to give the audience credit for that they will pick up on what you're laying down and you don't need to hammer them over the head with it. And I think that is something about the writing and just sort of the way that things are constructed, especially in Fallout 4, and I think again that carries forward into Fallout 76. That's something that they do, and I think that they have done very well.
Did you see that John Carpenter is apparently like a little bit addicted to playing Fallout 76? That was
I did see that.
I read that and I just thought, oh my god, that is the best thing I've read all day.
Just think, we may have played with John Carpenter at some point and not known it.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. John Carpenter just does like one Twitch stream one time and we just see like a glimpse of his name in Fallout 76, and then it's just a manhunt to figure out like who's played with this guy. Who knows this guy? Who's played Fallout 76 with legendary director John Carpenter? Wow, that'd be a thing and a half. Have you like gone back? Because like I guess specifically from a storytelling perspective, like a writer's perspective, because I also have a little bit of time in the film industry and creative writing. It's just been like small indie projects here in Portland. But I've been in there a little bit. When it comes to the writing of like Fallout, because a lot of people point to Fallout 4 as having like a weak quest line, like a main quest line. And they say like not all of the quests are very well written. One quest that comes up a lot is it's like boy in a fridge or kid in the fridge, where you find that ghoul kid who's in the fridge. Yep. And then like that brings up a lot of lore implications and stuff like that. I think the writing of the mission of the quest is good. It's simplistic, it's basic, it's easy. The question of like, does it break lore and stuff is, I think, another question. But when it comes to like the general writing of Fallout 4, and again, a lot of people are probably speaking comparatively and nostalgically for, you know, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 1, Fallout 2, stuff like that. In your opinion, like how does the writing quality of Fallout 4 like stack up to, like, you know, like just to get a little over the top with it, like Shakespeare? Like, how does it relate to Shakespeare? I
think it's a difficult comparison to make to any kind of traditional sort of storytelling, mm-hmm. because there is, of course, the core quest line that you deal with in trying to find Sean. But then all the side quests that you do, like the one that you mentioned, and there's a ton of different ones, like when you find Kate and cure her of her addictions, or the thing with Rex Goodman, you know, all these various side quests that you can do. So it's not, the storytelling isn't necessarily as linear as what we're used to from television, movies, books, whatever. I think that the way that I look at the story that's told in a game is not as much in the nuts and bolts, like specific lines of dialogue, for example. I won't look at that as closely as I would with a TV show or a movie. What I try to look at is what they're trying to accomplish thematically, and do they accomplish that? Like you mentioned the racism thing with the synths and with the ghouls. Do they nail that allegory in a way that is as affecting as they want it to be? And I think results, generally speaking, as they often are a little bit mixed. I think overall, yeah, they did. But it's hard to accomplish that in something that's interactive and nonlinear like a game. So in terms of the way that the story is told, I think that they do a very good job of accomplishing what they want to do. Because the danger that you have if you go too far in one direction is it's just a bunch of cutscenes, and you occasionally click a button to pick a dialogue option, you know, and you don't want to do that. I forget what games they were talking about, but there was a conversation on Twitter today where people were saying they were comparing those kinds of games with ones that are a little bit more open in terms of the way that the story is told. So I think in terms of accomplishing what they set out to accomplish, I think they do a really good job. And I think that the writing, generally speaking, is pretty good. Like, I think the Rex Goodman stuff has the right mix of being poignant, being humorous, being earnest, all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that the writing in Fallout 4 is solid, considering the, I don't want to say grading on the curve, but looking at it from the perspective of the structure that they are telling that story in. And I will say, one sentiment that I've seen is, it seems like there is a subset of specifically New Vegas fans that feel like, or express the opinion that it's not a good story or it's not good writing if it's not just everything sucks all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, everything has to be awful and bleak and terrible, and everybody sucks, and everybody has to go through the trials of Job, and even worse than that, for it to be a good story or an interesting story. I think that's try-hard edgelord nonsense. That's not to say that, number one, that New Vegas is try-hard edgelord nonsense, or that all or even most New Vegas fans fall into that category either. But that's a sentiment that I've seen, especially with people who are really big fans of New Vegas and really like to crap on, especially 76, but also Fallout 4, or, you know, they'll just say Bethesda Fallout. Whereas it doesn't have to be Ted Lasso, but I think that the sort of generally optimistic or the generally upbeat, you know, like if you're looking at a graph, like it stays above that sort of midpoint line. It doesn't have to be, it's not a kid's show. You know, it doesn't have to go that far. But I like stuff that's not everything sucks all the time. And you see that, like, one place where you see that right now is in Star Trek. There are several Star Trek shows out right now that are on either side of that specific line. And I think the ones that I enjoy the most, shouldn't even say I think I know the ones that I enjoy the most are the ones that have that hopeful, optimistic tone like the original series did and like TNG did. Mm-hmm. So like Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, those have that sort of classic Star Trek feel. I don't like Discovery as much because I always call it Star Trek, everything sucks and always has, because it seems like they're hell bent on not only saying, okay, listen, the universe is bad and 95% of the people in it are bad, and on top of that, you, Star Trek viewer, are a naive idiot for thinking that it was ever anything other than that. So all that hopeful optimism that you had in the original series, or that you had in TNG, or even in Voyager or in Enterprise, you were stupid to believe that was actually true, and I'm going to tell you why. And you compare and contrast that with Deep Space Nine, which had some very dark themes, and had, bad things happened in DS9, and definitely had a darker tone than those other series. But they did it in a way that I think didn't compromise that sort of the Star Trek oeuvre in terms of that tone. Whereas Discovery, and I think, if I'm being frank, it's because the folks who are steering that ship don't have the ability to do it as deftly as the people who ran DS9. Because DS9 is widely considered to be the best Star Trek show ever. And they did that despite the fact that they took a lot of risks in that show to kind of flip that tone, and complex storylines that sometimes verged into the darker side of things, but they did it in a really compelling way, in a way that I think worked really well, in a way that I don't feel the Discovery or the first two seasons of Picard really were able to pull off.
One of the things that I really like when it comes to storytelling is like, because thematically, maybe not thematically, but like artistically, right? There's when it comes to storytelling, there's always like, various different like postmodernism stories, like there's post-apocalypse, there's cyberpunk, there's steampunk, there's splatterpunk, there's this, that, and the other thing, and they all have like a specific artistic style about it. Solar punk is something that I've gotten really big into. You think a lot of Hayao Miyazaki stuff. What is it? Nausicaa, Valley of the Winds, Howl's Moving Castle, things like that. But like, it seems that Bethesda is sort of trying to capture that sort of essence, where it's like, it's not solar punk, but it's trying to capture the idea that people aren't, just desolate and just scraping by, just trying to scrape by. They're actually like rebuilding and creating a sense of community and stuff.
Well, and look at human history. That's what humans have always done. And the idea that humans would suddenly stop doing that in the face of this particular apocalypse is, I think it's not the way I think that things would go based on human history. It's the same thing with, I know people have gotten on the Wasteland Theater Company for putting on Shakespeare plays in Fallout 76 in game. Mm-hmm. And that's ridiculous. That's lore breaking, because that wouldn't happen. And I'm like, first off, you have Rex Goodman in Fallout 4, who's not doing exactly that, but still trying to tell a story, and the radio station doesn't work, but getting that story out, like, that's his ultimate goal.
And you have Mr. House in New Vegas literally starting up casinos again.
And people and look, even going outside of Fallout, again, going back to human history, what did people do during the Blitz? What did people do during the Black Death? They did those sorts of things. Artistic expression doesn't stop when when the worst things that can possibly happen, they continue, because it's the way that the human mind works. So it's all, so yeah, so there's a balance that needs to be struck, but I think that if you verge too far to the negative side of that, I think it at least for me, it just doesn't ring true, and it goes back to that try-hard edgelord thing, where I think that it's just, if that's what folks want to see, it's entirely legitimate to tell a story where everything sucks. I don't mean to imply that people shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Because you just it's not the kind of thing that I want to consume. And I also think that, generally speaking, if you go too far in that direction, it just doesn't. It breaks immersion for me. I'll put it that way, because obviously there's always a suspension of disbelief. But if it gets too bad, it's just hard to keep watching or listening or reading.
By the time this video will have come out, I will have uploaded at least one other video. This video specifically talking about LGBTQ characters like across the Fallout franchise. Because I'm a shill and I have to shill for Pride Month. I'm part of the gay agenda problem.
That's right.
But in my study and my research for that video, because I think probably one of the maybe not one of the first things, because you have Arcade Gan and you have Veronica, all that.
Yep.
But two of the characters that I think maybe not a lot of people overlook, but definitely get like they're definitely not top 5, or maybe even top 10, is Corporal Betsy in Camp McCarran, who had that unfortunate run-in with Cook, and then an escort named Jimmy who works at the Casa Madrid Motel in Westside, I think. Him specifically, he has an interesting backstory, because he was actually a slave under the Legion, and he was given to a centurion, and he was his tent slave. All the innuendos that are applied in that title, very much intended. But he was apparently treated very well by this centurion. There was even like maybe a little bit of romance behind the scenes, but obviously that is not something that is exactly highlighted or praised among the Legion. So when things started to get a little too close to being revealed, this centurion basically took Jimmy out to the middle of the desert and tried to kill him. Jimmy got lucky with a swift kick, and just I think in his words, he ran till he couldn't run, and then after that he swam, or something along those lines. But it's interesting because that's kind of along that same sort of thought process that you were talking about, where it's all like, oh, it's a story and just like everything sucks. But along that same lines, though, it has, it's an objective standpoint whether or not you think going into a life of prostitution is, a meaningful leg up from literally being a slave to a centurion. But it is still a story of like escape and survival, and like trying to carve out a new life after that point. And so like to what you were getting at with like stories that like, they're just like everything sucks, this bad, like nothing's happy, everybody's miserable, shit like that. I think that writing like that can work, but it has to be within a specific there's got to be like a thematic point to it, It has to be.
Right. Yeah, things shouldn't suck just for the sake of having things be terrible.
Yeah, there has to be meaning behind it. That's one thing that I get, maybe not all the time, but every once in a while I'll have somebody tell me like, oh, you're reading too much into this, or you're extrapolating too much on that, or you're going too far on that. And like, you guys keep telling me how good Fallout New Vegas is, how good the storytelling is, and yet you're saying that the storytelling is not good enough for this to be a potential intended meaning when it's literally staring you in the face? No. Good writing begets good meaning, and good meaning begets good writing.
And really, you know, I talk about how I don't like consuming stuff where everything sucks. If Star Trek Discovery was better written and sort of the mood was the same, I would enjoy it a lot more. Like I do watch it. I don't hate watch it. It's not a show that I dislike enough that I'm gonna never watch it. But I do think In Defter Hands, even keeping the same tone and the same mood, I think it would be like, look at The Shield. So The Shield, I think, is a really good example of that. Everything sucked in The Shield. Everybody was bad. It was like there was one or two characters that weren't just pure awfulness. Yet it was so well written and so well presented, and the characters were so compelling that it was absolutely riveting. So that's an example of how you can do something like that and do it well. It's one of my favorite examples of that kind of show.
What's your favorite Fallout quest and why?
Oh boy, I would have to think. The quests in Fallout 76 are sort of secondary to the online, you know, the live service part of the game, at least for me. And that's not, I don't mean that in an insulting way. I'm just saying what brings the milkshake that brings the boys to the yard is playing with other people. I mean, at least for me. So let me think. I'd have to go back to Fallout 4. I really did like the quest line involving Curie. The sort of the whole thing. I liked, because there were a lot of moral implications. Like, you have effectively what is a brain dead synth. And is it still morally right to take the consciousness of Curie and put it into this body? It's not a human, but, you know, there's so many implications that go along with that, and it peels away the synth thing in a way that I don't think is done in other areas, even the very synth specific areas of it, where you're talking about a lot of the morality comes in when you're dealing with the railroad, and of course, obviously, when you're working with the Institute. But I think it's more clinical when you're dealing with the Institute itself. But the railroad, it really does look at the synths as humans, and you get that kind of thing. So I think that aspect of it really was pulled together nicely in Curie's quest line. If I thought about it more, I would probably come up with something different, but just off the top of my head, what springs to mind is I like that. And really with anything, whether it's a quest line in a game or whether it's a TV show or a movie or a book, what I end up liking about something is how much it moves me, like sort of how it hits me emotionally. And I think there were a lot of emotional beats in that were really good, and I think they were genuinely affecting. So if I get a question like that out of the blue, that's where my answer will usually come from. What's your least favorite then? Like, obviously Dima's, I don't even have to wait. Dima's Memories. Oh, yeah. That's cheating, because that's just like universally like the least favorite. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really up on Fallout 4 discourse. Oh no, yeah, so like universally. I'm not surprised. Like day one, I remember because I was there like day one for Fallout 4, and I was there for every single DLC. I had people telling me like, you're an idiot for buying the season pass for $20, and then it went up to 40 like 4 weeks later, and I'm like, guess who's stupid now? Stupid like a fox. Yeah. And then I try to do a cool kickflip and just biff and like smack my head against the table and black out for 3 days. But I remember like day one, like Far Harbor had like just dropped, and like within the week everybody was saying how awful the Dima's memory sequence was. Like I was on Xbox at the time, but later when I started getting into modding and stuff, like I found a mod that was, you know, just like skip Dima's memory sequence. Yep. And I'm like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever, because I never have to do that. I was going to mention that myself, actually. That was maybe the best mod of any. And I was a PlayStation guy. I didn't have a console other than a PlayStation since my Dreamcast until, was it last year? Yeah, I guess it was, well, no, it was a little over a year ago when I got an Xbox. My first ever Xbox. So I was on PlayStation for all of Fallout 4. So mod support in Fallout 4 was great, and that is probably the best part about it. And also, I didn't like the fact that there was also the mod, and I played everything through vanilla to do it before I modded anything. But I also liked the ability to skip over the part where so basically you can complete the Nuka World quest, but not break everything off with the Minutemen.
Interesting.
So I did that too.
Okay, that makes sense.
It basically skips over the part where Preston you betray Preston and he flips out on you and all that kind of thing.
You just kind of play both sides of the fence.
Yeah. Because Preston's a big dope anyway. Sure we could fool him.
He's a little goofy sometimes. Yeah. So like, what's so with Once Upon a Wasteland, what's like, give us the elevator pitch on that. What is Once Upon a Wasteland? What is the story there?
So Once Upon a Wasteland is the story of a spy and a scribe who come together and start to work to save the civilization that is just starting to grow in Appalachia, in the face of growing dangers and different factions that are trying to seize control. That's and don't mean to bury the lead, and fall in love along the way. Mm-hmm. That's the log line, basically.
Yeah. When it comes to because we were talking a lot about like story meaning and stuff, like with the I mean, obviously not trying to get like a second to second recap, but like what's the larger point, like the larger narrative, like meaning stuff, like what's the meaning or the emotion you're trying to get at with Once Upon a Wasteland?
So I think, kind of going back to some of the thematic stuff that we were talking about earlier, I think it's to show that love finds a way. We talked about how human nature is to do things like put on plays and not just totally give up hope. I think is sort of the broader way to put that. No matter what kind of apocalypse they happen to be facing at the time, people always have and always will fall in love. If they had stopped doing that, then there wouldn't be a human race now. So I think it's inbuilt in people to fall in love, and to have that be something that they can latch onto, not only in spite of dealing with the effects of a nuclear war or some other sort of apocalypse, but maybe in part because of that. So it's almost like think about the end of WALL-E, spoiler alert, where they see the plant popping up, the little plant popping up out of the ground, and they're like, oh, it's that sort of thing, that hopefulness, mm-hmm. and that belief in human nature. And it's not just that sort of animal instinct to procreate. It's love. It's emotional. It's not just a biological imperative. And obviously, considering the two characters that lead the show, there isn't a biological imperative to procreate between the two of them. So that part of it is, it's just a belief in human nature, that will always be something that happens, and it's always something that all of us can hang our hats on as something to look at and believe in.
One of the things that I usually think of whenever I see like discourse around like gender swapping or race swapping or sexual orientation min-maxing, making them straight, gay, bisexual when it comes to characters in media and stuff. Because there's people who are always like, oh, this is like completely unnecessary, it's making like this, that, and the other thing. I wonder, like, sometimes if people like they just write like a character, they write a character, a narrative, and then just like roll dice or flip coins. Like, is this going to be a male character? Are they going to be gay? Are they going to be straight, black, white, Asian, blah 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 blah? Because I mean, you can't always please everybody. There's always going to be somebody that's like, oh, like this character was like an insert for this or an insert for that, or you're trying to push for this agenda, this, that, and the other thing. When it comes to Once Upon a Wasteland specifically, was there any sort of like conscious decision that you were going to be writing about gay characters, or was it just like a story of people and they just happen to be gay? Like, did you flip the coin? Did you roll the dice on that? Or was like from the start was like this the story that you wanted to tell with these characters specifically?
Yeah, I can tell you exactly. It's very much the latter. I didn't go into this with the intention to tell a queer love story. That wasn't on my mind. And I guess I'm naive myself in a lot of ways, and this is going to sound hokey, but I don't see the difference between a couple that is two women, or a couple that is two men, or a couple that is a man and a woman, or or has non-binary folks in that relationship. Love is love, and I know that can be almost trite, but it's the best way to kind of express what I'm getting at. I don't see a difference in love between those, in whatever configuration it comes in. That doesn't really matter to me. So I can tell you specifically for this story, the reason it came together with two women as the lead characters, it was very simple. My OC, the one that I talked about fleshing out with Lawrence from Modus Files, was a woman. Part of the sort of the first kernel of the story was the fact that when Steel Dawn dropped, everybody loved Odessa Valdez from the Brotherhood of Steel. It was a big thing online. Everybody loved the character. But one thing that people noted was that you could flirt with her, but you couldn't romance her. There were a couple of responses that she had to your flirting dialogue where either she shut you down cold or was a little bit receptive, but you couldn't actually romance her like you could in other Fallout games. So I thought, hey, what if you could? Why don't I explore that? Because I did want to write a story that was at its core a romance. So I thought, well, hey, why don't I use this character from the game, use the OC that I've already talked about, and then bring those two together and make them the core of this story. So that's really where it came from. And I've said there would certainly be some details that would be different, but in general, I wouldn't have written the romance much differently, if differently at all, if it had been a man and a woman. So, I mean, I didn't come into it with any agenda. And again, I guess I am naive. I know how the world works, but that was what the story told me what it wanted to be, and I just rolled with it. And the 1-star review that we got, that the person deleted, it looked like, because it doesn't show up anymore, was I don't feel like pulling it up, but it says the subject line, which is an all-time classic, was lesbians, like with a question mark, and it said it's something to the effect of, this story has nothing to do with Fallout, it just exists to push a political agenda.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that tweet.
Oh yeah, and I've posted it several times because it's hilarious, and people roasted the person in the review because it's like, the agenda is queer people existing, because they do. Like, because I can tell you, I didn't come into it with any sort of agenda to, like, I didn't come in saying, I'm going to show these sweaty basement video game nerds that there's gay people in their video games. It wasn't like that. It just, it's just the way the story came out, and I'm not sad about it. Like, I'm not resistant to this being a queer love story either. but I didn't go into it with the intention. Like that wasn't where it started from. That was just it was very much on the opposite end of it.
I remember I can't remember when. I want to say it was sometime in 2021. There was a Twitter thread that got screenshot and was rolling around the Fallout community for a little bit. Fallout 76 had a bundle that was put out there, and it was the communist bundle, so you could buy a whole bunch of communist paints and stuff. And there was a response to, I want to say it was an IGN post about it, but I don't think it was IGN. But it was like, one of those video game news outlets, and they like, here's the bundle and stuff. And this commenter was basically like, oh, like this is promoting communism, but like communism and Fallout, they're like, this is exactly what Fallout is not about. Like, that's the whole point of Fallout. And everybody was all like, I'm sorry, have you like ever played a Fallout game? It has more, like, I wish I still had the I probably still have it somewhere, like saved in a file that's like deep down in my drive or something, but like it was so perfect, because it's one of those things where it's like you're completely missing the point of the actual game, and like, comparing a queer love story to just somebody being blatantly wrong about what Fallout's overall theme is, its overall conversation about capitalism and communism and all that stuff. Like, they're two completely different things. But it is one of those situations where it's like you're missing the bigger point here. Like, yes, this is a story that stars two queer people, but it's more than just that. It's not like we're just hitting record for 30 minutes and then just saying like, these characters are queer, like over and over again. Like, no, there's an actual story to it. There's a point beyond that, but beyond the identity of the characters, there's a larger thing we're getting at here. It's not.
Well, and I can tell you, going in, one of the reasons I wanted to write something that had a love story and romance at its core was I wanted to put things in the show, like use things that I had personally experienced, and the fact that it was that the story involves two women, that didn't change that one bit, because relationships, generally speaking, I don't want to say they play out the same way, but the orientation and the configuration of the couple has less bearing on some of those sort of almost specific story beats of a love story in real life, if you know what I mean. That stuff, the things that happen to me are the kinds of things that can happen in any love story or any real, any romance, any, in real life. So, there were things that happened in my relationships that I included, especially in the first season, and then the second season that shifted a little bit, but it was still drawing a lot on personal experiences and personal emotions and those kinds of things, writing in things that had been said to me or that I had said to other people, those kinds of things. And it didn't matter that I'm a man and I would have said those things to a woman and vice versa. It still carried the same emotional weight, and it still fit in the context of this particular love story that happened to be between two women. So yeah, and people saying politics and Fallout, it's the same thing as people who complain about, oh, when did Star Trek get so woke? Like, yeah. guys,
always
1966 is when you're looking is the answer you're looking for. Then it's like, I'm sorry guys, but it has always been political.
Star Trek has always been woke. Fallout has always been political. The sky has always been blue. These are facts about the real world.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of it though is people will take things away that they want to, or people will hear what they want to hear sometimes. I know one common example is you see people with Punisher decals, and their particular political feelings are not the kind of things that Mr. Castle would approve of. Like, it's like you took exactly the wrong message from this comic, and that exists. That exists everywhere, I think. So there's a little bit of it in that, and it's I mean, I'm not here to make anybody upset, and I'm certainly not here to push any political agenda. But what I am going to do is I'm going to tell the story that I want to tell, and hopefully that story resonates with people, no matter what their particular political leanings are. Because I like to think that the stories that I tell tend to be universal, and I think that they're the kinds of things that people can understand and can empathize with, even if even outside of the romance angle. There's a lot of stuff in to steal a Dom Toretto line, there's a lot that's about family. So there's a lot of different themes that flow throughout the show that I think people can identify with. Because again, what I look for when I consume any piece of media is I want to be moved emotionally, and that informs the way that I create and the way that I write. I want to move people emotionally, so I construct things in a way that I at least hope fosters that.
When you talk about taking a little bit of inspiration from your real life, I would assume you're talking about moments that include you being a technology focused super spy, right?
Absolutely. Yep. That was the main inspiration was my long history as a highly trained intelligence operative by Vault Tech and the U.S. government.
Hell yeah. I would assume you use that training and that skill to get Todd Howard to introduce your story as canon to Odessa's own timeline.
Yeah, we're still working on that one. But,
yeah. Was because we talked a little bit about it. We talked a lot about the fact that Once Upon a Wasteland stars a queer couple and stuff like that. When you originally put this out there, put the story out there and got the podcast all up and running, what was the initial response from it, especially since, because this hasn't been around for too long. It's been a year and a half, 2 years.
A little. We're closing in on 2 years. The prologue launched in late October of 2021, and then the first episode was in the beginning of November. So yeah, a year and a half, and we're getting closer to 2 years now.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess in 2021 there was kind of a couple other things that people were a little bit worried about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember hearing something about some stuff floating around.
It was just something about like the flu or something. I don't know.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a bad cold.
Yeah.
But when you first introduced the show and everything, what was the initial reception and stuff?
Well, the thing about shows like this, and this is common not just in Fallout storytelling or video game storytelling. This is pretty universal. Generally speaking, shows always tend to start off slow. So you don't get a lot of downloads at the beginning. You don't get a lot of listeners. And it's also sort of famously difficult to get feedback, whether that's with reviews on Apple Podcasts or people shooting you an email or shouting you out on Twitter. It's hard to get feedback. Mm-hmm. So the initial response from people that I talked to who listened to it, people who had reviewed scripts beforehand, they were all very positive about the way that the story was told. Sort of just, I guess, the best way to say it, I guess, is quality. It's well written, it's well acted, the story is coherent, it does fit in with Fallout lore. So it's sort of it ticks all the boxes, and it's the kind of thing where all you can really do is keep doing what you're doing and wait for it to catch on, and obviously get out there and promote it in any way that you can. Word of mouth is very important. Leverage people that you know who can get the word out, because Lawrence with Modus Files, super, he has always been tireless in promoting our show. Ken, who has a massive platform, was also somebody who did that quite a bit, so that helped get the word out. But we really didn't take off until around the end of the first season. Mm-hmm. That's when our numbers kind of took off. Our numbers were very good, don't get me wrong. Our numbers for a new show from a new creator, that was a video game story, our numbers were very, very good. Mm-hmm. But I think there were a few things that happened that I don't know exactly what all of them were, but whatever they were, they really caused our numbers to explode right at the end of that first season. And we had a lot of momentum going into the sort of that inter-season period. And then the second season has been sort of off the charts. One thing that really helped is Bethesda getting behind us. Well, I think that if there's a single thing that really pushed us to the moon, it was Bethesda and their help in getting the word out and sort of making people aware that we are a thing. And the implication of that is Bethesda says this is a thing worth listening to, even though this is not something we made or that we can officially it's not part of Fallout canon, but here we're showing you this, and we're sort of putting our tacit stamp of approval on it there. So that specific thing is the one thing that did. But I think there was also good word of mouth, and the word of mouth tends to grow things exponentially, and I think that happened also. Then we got some awards buzz, and that certainly helped. One of the things that I think I'm proudest of is the fact that we have great support from the Fallout community. It's extremely strong support. Everybody has been amazing about it. But the thing that I think is most not impressive, but maybe surprising, I don't know. Well, in any case, we have gotten so much play and so much support from people who had never played a Fallout game, people who had never heard of Fallout. Like I've gotten comments from people who are like, yeah, I listened to this and I didn't find out until I was 6 episodes in that it's based on a video game. Mm-hmm. Like, so, and that was a focus point for me, right? I wanted it to be the kind of thing that people who were Fallout fans could listen to and go, yeah, this is a really good Fallout story. But I also wanted to make it accessible enough and do enough world building on my own that somebody who couldn't spell Fallout would listen to it and still get it. And they would understand who the Brotherhood of Steel was, and they would understand what a ghoul is and what a raider is and all those sorts of things just by context clues and the way that things are presented in the story. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that, and I think that's reflected in the diversity of where we get our listenership from.
One of the things that I saw recently, as probably, well, I mean, I guess it would kind of be as a response to Starfield coming out and everything. Tom from the Fallout Lorecast. Mm-hmm. I saw a tweet from him where I think he's also starting to promote a Starfield themed podcast, or at least one like coming soon. Oh wait, no, I think that was actually a Skyrim based one. Oh wait, no, he's got a Skyrim based one. Maybe it was a Starfield based one. I'll probably have like a correction at this part if I'm wrong or need receipts on it. But if I remember correctly, one of the things that he's got working on now is a podcast specifically dedicated to Fallout lore, or not Fallout lore. Well, yes, Fallout lore, but he's also got an upcoming one that's going to be dedicated to Starfield lore and information and stuff. And then I saw that Chad is also making basically Fallout for Hope, but Starfield. So I think it's Starfield for Hope. And they're most likely going to be doing the same sort of fundraising stuff that Fallout for Hope does. Mm-hmm. Is there any plans or do you know of any plans for you or any other podcasters who are currently doing Fallout-centric stuff to get into doing stories based on Starfield, or is that something that's going to be like, you gotta give it like 3 months for the game to be out first to get in there and discover what can be found?
It's funny you should mention that. Ken, who does the Chad podcast, he already has a show in development that's Starfield based. Mm-hmm. It's called Frontier, and it is an anthology series. I forget how many episodes it's going to be, but I think it's 12 or 15 episodes. I don't remember off the top of my head, but that was something that he had in the works before the original launch date last November. I think probably I want to say maybe March or April. He started putting feelers out for that. So it's going to be an anthology series. The first episode is going to release when Starfield releases, and then there are going to be anthology episodes after that, and I am writing one of those. Mm-hmm. So that's it. Ken is writing several of the episodes himself, and then he brought in other writers to write one-off episodes. So since it's an anthology, rather than sort of a narrative, it's not a serial. So it's really just standalone stories in an anthology format, and that will be released starting in September when Starfield launches. And I do have one episode that I'm signed up for to write for that.
Nice. That's pretty cool. I'll have to touch base with is this something that's been promoted?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
yeah. He has a separate Twitter account for it. And actually, I can look it up real quick. I don't want to call it. I don't want to say the official one.
Yeah, I didn't want to just put new information that Ken hasn't made publicly available yet.
Oh yeah, no. I just what I meant was I didn't want to give the name for the official Starfield Twitter account when I meant to give the one for this show. But it's just to the Starfield.
That's
the Twitter. Yeah, that's the Twitter account for that series.
Awesome. If you're a fan of podcasts, especially anything from Ken or Lawrence, and especially here on or here with Once Upon a Wasteland, go check that out, Into the Starfield. Because me specifically, I'm really looking forward to Starfield. I think it's going to do a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about that more modern Bethesda stuff is starting to do, or more modern Fallout Bethesda is starting to do, where the writing is getting a lot more there's a lot more messaging and meaning behind it. And I feel like that's definitely something that we're going to be seeing in both Starfield's main quests as well as side quests and stuff.
I a lot of people have very high hopes for it, and I'm one of them. It looks amazing. Oh yeah, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I think it's going to be really good, and I think the fact that they pushed it back from November to this September, I think it speaks to how important this is to Bethesda and how seriously they're taking getting it right. Mm-hmm. Because they caught a lot of heat for delaying it, even though I know the opinion I expressed at the time that I continue to express is I'd much rather wait an extra 10 months and have the game be much better at launch than have a Cyberpunk 2077 situation where it's just so hideously broken on day one that it just makes people mad and plays into that old Bethesda stereotype that everything's hopelessly broken on launch and only the modders can fix it and that kind of stuff. So it really does feel like they're making a concerted effort to get it right, and I think that speaks to how important this is to them.
Same. I had when I heard that they were going to be delaying it, I had pretty much the exact same thought. I'm disappointed that I won't be able to play it in November, but I'd much rather give it, because we've said it so many times, so many times, where it's this game, it released in a really bad state. If they had just given it another year, this would have launched and it would have been a banger. Just like you said with Starfield, if Starfield had or not Starfield, if Cyberpunk had another year in development, it would have released as it is now, and maybe there still would have been issues and stuff, but it wouldn't have been one of the worst, one of the top 5 most disastrous video game launches of all times. Sometimes it really do be sometimes you just gotta let them cook, Yeah,
and it's, I got other stuff I can do. My life is not going to end because they're delaying Starfield for 10 months.
I still gotta finish Elden Ring. I still gotta finish that.
I just got Street Fighter 6, and nice. I've been playing NBA 2K23. Those are the two games that I've been mostly playing lately.
I've been playing a lot of. I've recently got back into to Citizen Sleeper myself, which is it's a very interesting game. I've talked about it a couple times in like live streams and stuff, but it's basically a point and click story game, but it has a dice mechanic. It's very, very obviously inspired by TTRPG games, but it has probably some of the best writing that I have seen from a video game in a while. And obviously, like, when I say that, I mean, like, I say not AAA games, because when I think AAA games, I put in like Red Dead Redemption 2, and then it's just like a little bit overkill. Like there's like RDR2 was a really good storytelling experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But when it comes to like small games like this, Doki Doki Literature Club is probably something that comes to mind when it comes to like really well done writing. Obviously this has a much different vibe and such to it, but it has very, very good writing. On that, what's like the, obviously I think anybody in the Bethesda sphere is obviously very excited for Starfield. Not counting Starfield, what's like the next big game you're looking forward to? Yeah. what's your like top wish listed game right now?
I think, going along with how important being emotionally moved is to me in the stuff I consume, obviously the choice is Mortal Kombat 1. Mm-hmm. I'm kidding. It is the game I'm looking forward to the most, but obviously it's not really known for its strong emotional beats, but it looks awesome.
You say that, really, but I cried when the reptile died.
Well, I'm mostly excited right now because Stryker is in it.
Oh, there you go.
From MK3. See, here's my Mortal Kombat story. Mm-hmm. I played a lot of Mortal Kombat back in the day in the arcade. And when Mortal Kombat 3 came out, the chain combos and all that, mm-hmm. that was the sort of the big thing. The cheesiest character, the character that it was easiest to spam combos with was Cabal, the guy with the mask. And you would get people who would come in and would just play forever as Cabal because they would just spam cheesy combos over and over. So what I would always like to do is I would go in and I would play against them as Stryker. Mm-hmm. And Stryker was slow. His combos were terrible. His special moves were awful. But it was always fun for me to go up there and play against them as this terrible character and just wipe the floor with them.
Yeah.
And just watch them be aghast about it. So when I saw him in the new trailer, it's not really new now, but the most recent trailer, I was like, hell yeah, because it was classic MK3 Stryker too. Like the flashlight and the taser thing. He was in his classic MK3 outfit. I was like, this is awesome.
all the muscle memories coming back. Like, oh, I'm gonna make people so upset.
Flash this flashlight in your eyes,
right? Like you're not gonna know what's happening. So I like to ask a lot of so far it's been something that I've asked like all of my guests, but when it comes to just like being a person, like what it like I guess more so in like any aspect, like being a good person, being a good artist, there's so many different aspects this can apply to, but like what is something that one ought to remember, if not like always have at the forefront of their mind in order to lead a good career, a good life, or to excel in artistic endeavors? What is the thing that leads to the most optimal human experience, or the most positive human experience?
Well, if we're talking about as a creator, I think maybe the best thing that you can carry with you is don't be too hard on yourself. Understand that I think it's natural for us as creators to sort of assume the worst, especially in situations where, and I see this with visual artists a lot, or in the case of our show when numbers were not great at the beginning, to sort of internalize that and think, oh, you know, I'm bad or this is bad. And really, what all you can realistically do is create the best creation that you can, whatever form that creation takes. And you have to have confidence that what you're doing is good. So it's okay to be self-critical. You need to be realistic when you're assessing things, but don't be too hard on yourself. If we're talking in general, to be a good person, I think that the thing that I try to do is remember the human. Remember that the person that you're interacting with on the other side of a screen, which is something that we do a lot, whether it's on social media like Twitter or Discord or in other places. Just remember that there is a human on the other side, and treat them as such. There are situations where that person doesn't deserve to be treated like a human, especially on Twitter. So it's important to understand when to disengage, how to curate your experience so that you're able to avoid people like that. You know, and that plays out a lot in real life. You know, the person that makes you mad in traffic, or the person that's a jerk to a retail worker, and you're standing in line and you see that. You know, I look at that and I'm like, those are examples of somebody not doing that. They're the center of their own story, and everybody else is an NPC. And that's not the way to go about real life. It's okay to do that in Fallout 76 and you know, another online game where you're dealing with an actual NPC. But out in the real world, everybody's a player character, and they should be treated as such.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with ReticentDuet, lead writer for the multi-award-winning Once Upon a Wasteland Storytime podcast. As always, if you enjoyed this episode of the Atomcast, the best way you can show your support is by subscribing to our Patreon, as your monthly contribution will go towards improving the quality of transmission, as well as helping to decrease the time between uploads. Until next time, I thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all out there in the wasteland.